Today on Locked on Buckeyes, we dive into how Rutgers plans to slow down the Buckeyes' offensive passing attack and why the Buckeyes defense should be able to dominate the Scarlet Knight offense.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back for an episode of Locked on Buckeyes for the Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, November 2nd in the year 2023, and today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for your first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. During today's episode, we welcome into the show Greg Patuto. He is the managing editor of the SB Nation site covering Rutgers football. Greg and I dive into the story of Rutgers offense and defense in their season, what it means for them to be bowl eligible right now, how good the Rutgers defense has been, and some struggles that they've had on offense. It's Preview Thursday, and we have the preview you need for the upcoming Buckeyes game against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. And joining us now here on Locked on Buckeyes is the managing editor of the onthebanks.com. It's the SB Nation site covering Rutgers athletics. It's Greg Patuto. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Jay. Appreciate you having me on.
No problem. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you because the more I dig into Rutgers, the more impressed I am with their record, their bowl eligibility, and how they're playing this year. Are you as impressed or surprised at how they're playing at this point in the season?
Surprised, no. Impressed on one side of the ball, yes. I'm sure that viewers can assume what side of the ball that is. I'm talking about the defense. I'm not impressed offensively, but as the team overall, I'm impressed with kind of how they've won some of the games that they've won, the scores that we've seen from them, and really just competing in the Big Ten a little better than they have in previous years. So all in all, it's been a successful start for Rutgers.
Let's keep there. You kind of dove into the story of the season. Let's get a little bit deeper. How would you describe Rutgers in 2023?
Gritty. They're tough, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It sounds like kind of a cliche when you say a defense is tough, but that's kind of what they've been, what their mantra has been. They've been a little shaky in the secondary, which I can see being a problem in this Ohio State matchup especially, but their front seven's been really strong. They had 3 experienced linebackers coming back. Tyreen Powell did suffer a season-ending injury. He's going to have surgery on his foot. But Mohamed Toure coming back from his knee injury last year has given them a big boost. And really up front, Aaron Lewis hasn't wrecked games like Rutgers fans have hoped on the edge, but he's a talented edge rusher, and they're real strong in the middle. Wesley Bailey, leading the charge, kind of stopping the run this year. So they've made it difficult for teams at times to get things going offensively.
Offensively, quarterback's going to be the conversation no matter what show you're on. How's the quarterback playing? Is he successful? Why? Is he struggling? Why? I think it's more of the struggling aspect for Gavin Wimsatt. I always struggle with his name. What have you seen from him this year that's maybe impressed you when the numbers aren't really that impressive?
Running the ball, I would say. He's really run the ball well. Scored 3 times on the ground against Indiana and then broke off an 80-yard run. He's big, he's athletic, and he's one of those deceivingly fast runners because of his size that when you watch him on TV, it doesn't really look like he's moving that fast, but he's moving fast and he's able to outrun defenses. When you look at passing the ball, he's been very inconsistent. That's something that Rutgers hasn't really opened up a lot this year, and I really don't expect it to happen at this point after 8 games. They kind of are what they are at this point. They've run the ball really well with Kyle Monungai, and Wimsatt has also gotten his chances and has done well, but passing the ball, they don't have a lot of threats on the outside for him to work with, and his decision-making has been shaky. So kind of the typical things that you expect to see from a young quarterback who's starting in his first season, but there hasn't been much improvement in that area. So I think fans want to see a little bit of improvement at least over these last 4 games before heading into next season.
The last 4 games for Rutgers got Ohio State this weekend. That's a home game for Rutgers. Then they have 2 road games in a row at Iowa, at Penn State, and then home again versus Maryland. It's not an easy end of the season for Rutgers at all. Luckily, you got Maryland at home, who has been struggling of late, But going on the road to Iowa and then to Penn State, that's definitely going to be two tough road games for the Scarlet Knights. For Wimsatt and Monungai, thank you for saying his name. I always struggle with that one. For Wimsatt, it's more so just slowing down to say it. Monungai, my brain says, oh, there's like 3 different ways to say this name. How can we figure it out? I just like people like yourself saying it clearly for myself. That 1-2 punch of them in the Rutgers rushing attack is a fun one. 5.2 yards a carry for Monungai, 5 yards a carry for Wimsatt. Monungai, unless something crazy happens, will eclipse the 1,000-yard rushing mark in this season. And that 1-2 punch, they're going to have monster games on Saturday if they plan to beat Ohio State in a game where Ohio State's defense is really good. We're going to dive into Rutgers defense later on. But if Rutgers offense wants to make something shake when they're on the field, those two guys on the ground are going to need to be a phenomenal 1-2 punch.
Yeah, and Monungai's production isn't really a surprise for Rutgers, but I would say the abundance, the chances that he's got has been a little surprising because coming into the season, that Rutgers backfield was supposed to be one of their strengths offensively. I guess it still is, but the depth kind of hasn't been shown because Monungai has taken over the role as the workhorse, as the bell cow for the offense. When you look at guys like Samuel Brown, who kind of burst onto the scene last year, and Aaron Young, who's been used in different ways, he's a good receiver out of the backfield. They came in with some injuries this year, so they started off slowly, and Rutgers has been kind of trying to work them back in. But at this point, Monungai's taken the job and kind of run with it, so their chances have been limited. But it's a good 1-2 punch, and Wimsatt, again, he's best right now. He's best when he's running the ball. So that duo has really kind of kept defenses off balance a little bit, and Rutgers has been able to sustain some drives.
How have you seen Monungai grow this year?
His vision, his toughness, his blocking for sure. He's been featured on a couple shows because of his blocking ability, but really just being the guy. He's had success in previous years. He's had carries, but he's never been a guy to take the ball 20, 25 times and, produce this kind of success, every now and then. But to be able to do it week in and week out, just his consistency really running the ball has been really, really impressive. And shout out to the Rutgers offensive line again, having a really good year unexpectedly to some degree, but the line has finally gelled for the first time under Greg Schiano, and Monungai's reaping all the benefits.
Even though Wimsatt is not the most accurate passer, and that's something that I saw just in the numbers and few things that I saw in preparing for this show, there still might be a guy on the outside that Rutgers might need to lean on to move the ball through the air. Let's say Wimsatt has a very good day passing the ball and really is consistent there. Who are some of the targets that he's going to try to go after in the passing game to move the ball down the field?
Christian Dremel's kind of turned into his favorite target, slot receiver for Rutgers. Smaller guy, undersized, but he plays well in the slot, runs good routes. He's pretty sure-handed. I'm personally a fan of Jaquay Jackson, a transfer that they got. He's very, very athletic on the outside. To me, he has the makings of a number one receiver on a team. Hasn't kind of taken that step yet. In the Big Ten, it was a step up from where he played last year, but he has a lot of athletic ability, can go up and get the ball. He's quick. So those have been their top two guys this year. The tight end position, kind of non-existent to a point. Johnny Langen's caught a few balls, and he's a very good blocker, but that's not really a threat to look for. So Christian Dremel for sure has kind of turned into that number one target, but Jaquay Jackson too is somebody to look out for.
We got to hear a little bit from Gavin Wimsatt and Kyle Monungai and other guys that are on the Rutgers Scarlet Knight offense. What about their defense? It is a big reason why Rutgers is 6-2 right now and bowl eligible. We'll dive into that side of the ball next on Locked on Buckeyes. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of player and stat types are what make Prize Picks the number one daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com Locked On College and use promo code Locked On College for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/ Locked On College and use code Locked On College for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Greg, I almost said Gavin once again. Greg, one of these throughout the show, if I say Gavin, it's not Gavin Wimsett. Let's just say his last name. It's Greg Patuto. Just so many, the two G's are kind of playing with my brain today. Greg, when it comes to this defense, and I went back and looked at some numbers, just comparing Ohio State's defensive numbers versus Rutgers and where they stand nationally ranked. This was surprising. I understand Greg Schiano, a defensive guy, NFL coach, used to coach at Ohio State. I understand what he is as a coach, but he's done a phenomenal job, Greg, of coaching this defense and really winning with defense this year.
Yeah, I mean, Schiano and Joe Harris-Simiak, the defensive coordinator, really drawing up good game plans for Rutgers, and their scheme's been very impressive. This will be the first game without Powell. The injury was suffered, I believe, in the Indiana game. It was kind of a surprise injury. You know, Schiano announced it after that game during the bye week. So this will be the first game without him. But Deion Jennings and Mohamed Touré in the middle of the field have been very strong at the linebacker position. And just the pressure, too, Rutgers has been able to put on quarterbacks. They're not necessarily getting home as much as fans would like to see, but they're able to get quarterbacks off their spot. And that's obviously a huge deal for any team, any game, but especially in the Big Ten that's so focused on, you know, football in the trenches. That's important for Rutgers to kind of get after the quarterback a little bit and make them uncomfortable.
For those wondering how the numbers of Rutgers defense stacks up with Ohio State's, Ohio State is only giving up 10 points a game. Rutgers is giving up 15.8. Ohio State is only allowing 266 yards per game. Rutgers, 276.9. Ohio State is only allowing teams to pass, giving up 160.3 passing yards per game. Rutgers is better at 156.3. And then the rushing defense, 99.8 yards a game for Ohio State, 120.5 for Rutgers. Those numbers alone, the national rankings, I could have gone through all of those. It just shines a light on how good this defense is. Ohio State's offense is one of those this year where you thought you would get more, but like you said, it's game 9 for both teams. They are who they are. So the offense at Ohio State that struggles at times, and you mentioned how the defense is getting quarterbacks off their spot and how the defense is getting quarterbacks off schedule. That might be what they have to do for all 4 quarters to potentially win this game. If they get Kyle McCord off of his spot, we have seen Kyle McCord make issues when that is something that is something he cannot do consistently. Do you think Rutgers can do that on Saturday?
I think they can maybe put a little pressure on. I'm not going to say that that's going to blow up the complete offensive scheme for Ohio State, because I mentioned a little earlier that the secondary has been a question mark for me. It's been a little shaky. And obviously when you have receivers like Ohio State does, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., all the guys over there, that McCord just might have to play good enough, which is kind of what he's been doing all year. You know, I haven't been overly impressed with Kyle McCord this season. I haven't taken the temperature of many Ohio State fans or, you know, anything on social media, but I haven't been overly impressed. And it's funny because I think this is one of the more complete teams that Ohio State's had in recent years, which is crazy to say because of all the success that they've had. So makes you want CJ Stroud back for one more year to play this season. But I think if Rutgers can maybe make things uncomfortable, they can get a couple stops. But again, I don't see it happening over the course of a game, especially when there's so many playmakers on the outside against this Rutgers secondary.
The playmakers on the outside is one that I do believe is going to be a little bit different this week than the past couple, as Emeka Egbuka, I believe, is going to come back on the field. You get him on the field, Marvin Harrison Jr., and a secondary that has issues. It might be lights out for Rutgers. It might be game over really quickly. The running game for Ohio State saw a burst a week ago with Travion Henderson and the way that he ran a week ago. That is huge because I think that Ohio State had the chance to figure things out and be more of a balanced offense moving forward. Their rushing numbers this year are really, really bad, not up to the standard at Ohio State. How do you think Rutgers defense, mainly the front seven, will be able to handle Henderson if he is healthy and confident going into this game?
Yeah, that's kind of been the surprise for Ohio State, right? Especially with Travion Henderson being back once again, just the talent he has, the experience that he has, could have been a strength for this team this year. But Rutgers has been stopping the run pretty well. They've handled it, for the most part. They've had a couple games where they've given up, over 100 yards, stuff like that against Michigan and Wisconsin, especially teams that run the ball really well. But they should be able. I expect them to compete against this Ohio State offensive line and against Henderson, mainly using those linebackers that I've said. I've mentioned them a couple of times, so you could tell how strongly I feel about this group in the middle of the defense. So that should be the strength. They've done a good job plugging up holes. They tackle really well. It just looks like a more hard-hitting defense than we've seen in recent years. So I'm kind of curious to see how they match up against a team like Ohio State.
How hands-on is Greg Schiano with this defense?
He's hands-on. He's a defensive guy. I think Joe Harris-Simiak does a lot of the work, though, which I've been very, very impressed with him as a defensive coordinator. The game plans that he's drawn up against certain teams has been very, very impressive. Coming in to this season, Temple was maybe, a strange matchup for Rutgers. E.J. Warner likes to throw the ball around a lot for that team. In week 3, they were able to shut him down. They were able to kind of slow down a Wisconsin offense that was reeling at the time, and they didn't allow them to have that breakout game. Tanner Mordecai and all of them kept them in check outside of Braylon Allen. So they've been able to draw up the game plans, and even in the Michigan game to a point, they made it difficult for Michigan to move the ball. I believe they allowed 31 points in that game. So this will be the best offense they face, by far, in my opinion, the most playmakers on the outside, especially if Ibuka is able to go. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of game plan they draw. But Schiano, being the defensive guy, he's definitely involved heavily.
Last thing here, this is about a brotherly tie between a Buckeye and a Scarlet Knight. Desmond Igbinosun is the brother of Ohio State starting corner Davidson Igbinosun. And I don't normally look into this, but I happened to come across an article and I was like, oh, there's brothers that are playing each other in this game. Not looking to do the brotherly tie, but how well has Desmond Igbinosun played this year?
He's played really well. This is kind of his first year getting that consistent playing time. And he's been very impressive. Both Jersey kids, one staying home. I believe Davison was committed to Ole Miss, or somebody was committed to Ole Miss.
He was at Ole Miss and then transferred to Ohio State.
That's what I wanted to make sure I had the right one there. But
yeah.
I knew that he was there and then going to Ohio State. So getting a great chance for him. We're happy to see it out here in New Jersey. But yeah, Desmond's played really well. He's a big part of that defense, and they're definitely going to be on the field a lot, both of them. So it'll be nice to see.
We got the defensive side and the offensive side about Rutgers, but does Greg think Rutgers will win on Saturday? We dive into that next on Locked on Buckeyes. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line bet. That's right. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Once again, visit FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This episode is also brought to you by Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus has the best selection of pool tables, game tables, shuffleboard tables, and more, and the best service in Central Ohio. And did you know Billiards Plus has top-of-the-line grills with up to 30-year warranties? That's longer than most roofs. Billiards Plus carries the best pool tables from Brunswick, Austin, Canada, Billiards, and more. Plus, top-of-the-line grills from PK, Napoleon, Memphis, and the Griddle. That could very well be the last grill you own. The perfect gift for any occasion is in stock at Billiards Plus. Go big with an awesome pool table or shuffleboard table, or a little more modest with a dartboard or poker table. No matter the season, Billiards Plus has you covered for all your indoor and outdoor entertainment needs. And the people at Billiards Plus are the best part of the experience. Kenny, Sarah, and the whole staff will take amazing care of you. Billiards Plus, visit their showroom on Dublin Center Drive in Dublin. This is one of those games that in any given year, I am looking at Rutgers and kind of circling it, knowing it's going to be a little bit of a different game. I've seen Rutgers use multiple quarterbacks against Ohio State. I think this year's game will be more of a defensive battle where you have two of the best defenses or two of the better defenses in the Big Ten. I can't say best because Michigan's really good. Like, sign stealing aside, they're still really good, playing good ball. So I have to say one of the best because I still think Michigan has the best defense in the country in the conference. Ohio State fans might hate me for saying that, but I think that's where we are. When it comes to this game, do you think it's more of a close game early, or do you think it's Ohio State's going to just handle it, or do you think Rutgers can come away with a victory?
I think it's going to be a consistent effort for Ohio State. I don't know if it'll be, like recent years, kind of jumping on them 3-4 touchdowns, early in the second quarter. But it'll be one of those games consistently, and then you look up at the scoreboard at the end, and it's a wide margin. If I had to pick a score, only because I'm nervous about this Rutgers offense being able to score against this Ohio State defense, that's been my concern all year, and why I'm still a little hesitant on this Rutgers team, because at the end of the day, you got to score. I'm looking at, maybe a 34-13 type game. I do think they're able to extend in that second quarter because of, talent, depth, all that stuff. So I don't see Rutgers coming away with this victory. It's nice to Rutgers fans now should just be happy to see a betting line that's under 20, in this matchup. So the gap might be closing, but for right now, it's still not close at all, in my opinion. So until this offense for Rutgers maybe makes some improvements and shows that they can make some noise consistently, I can't see this matchup being anything but probably around the score I said.
For our friends that are betting and are looking to try to figure out what the current line is, it's minus 18.5 Ohio State. And then the over-under is set at 42.5 currently. That's coming from our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. And I am with you. I think this defensive battle and what Rutgers is the threat they're going to pose to the Ohio State offense, I think it's one that it's going to cause Ohio State maybe to do some things they don't want to do. Maybe Ryan Day wants to throw the ball the entire time, but realizes that might not work. Or maybe Ryan Day is like, hey, I want to run the ball, but maybe that doesn't work. I think Ohio State wins 34-9. I don't normally say 9 as a final score for the opposition. I do think Rutgers gets 3 field goals. Somehow, some way, not sure, but they get 3 field goals. I don't think they score a touchdown, which is still it's a win for Ohio State. Allowing only field goals and not allowing an opposing team to score a touchdown, that is huge. I do think Ohio State wins, but I think we're going to come away from this game thinking a couple things about these teams. One, it was a tougher battle, and the defense has played better than people may have expected. And two, myself, I do believe I'll gain more respect for Rutgers at the end of this contest.
Yeah, that's the goal, too, for Rutgers a lot this year. They're 6-2. You got 4 tough games to end the year. Go out and compete. In this particular matchup, I kind of see it playing out the way that Michigan game did, when it didn't feel like Michigan really blew them out. They had a pick 6, obviously, that contributed to the score. But you look up at the end of the game, and it's 31-7. Rutgers broke off a long touchdown on the third play of the game, took a 7-0 lead, and then that was all they scored for the day. So I could see it somewhere there. Maybe they get a touchdown late in this game, once the score's kind of in check. But I think they're going to have trouble moving it against this Ohio State defense. And, Rutgers defense, they're gonna do what they can on the outside, especially against those weapons. So we'll see what they can do. But if they can make it a little ugly, then, who knows? Anything could happen to slow down Ohio State. But compared to that Michigan game, I also think the Buckeyes have more big play ability. So there's a lot of different factors here. I'm curious to see how it plays out, especially defensively for Rutgers.
Last thing here, this is another prediction that I did not ask you about beforehand, but it's just Rutgers' last 4 games of the season. Ohio State's at home, on the road against Iowa, on the road against Penn State, and then back at home for Maryland, the last regular season game for the Scarlet Knights. If you were to pick how you think this is going to go, pick the 4 games, what do you think Rutgers' record will be in those 4 games after they finish the game against Maryland?
Before the season, I had Rutgers finishing 6-6, playing out exactly how it has to this point, and then losing the last 4. If you ask me right now, I'm probably still on that side of that they won't win these last 4. Ohio State and Penn State are going to be losses. You can maybe make an argument for Iowa, but it's on the road. And again, I don't trust Rutgers to score enough consistently against that Iowa defense, as bad as Iowa's offense has been, and they've been really, really bad.
Yeah,
but
so bad they had to fire their offensive coordinator. It should have happened a couple years ago, but
it's way overdue in that
yeah,
aspect.
it
But
is.
I don't know if Rutgers could score enough, especially on the road in that game. Maybe they steal one against Maryland with how bad they've been playing, but that game is still 4 weeks away, so we don't know what could happen until then. But if you ask me right now, I think they'll probably finish 6-6. And at the end of the day, despite 4 losses to end the year, I think fans should look at this as a successful season, getting back to a bowl game legitimately for the first time since 2014.
That's insane. That's wild to think it's been that long since they've been to a bowl game. Last thought here. What does it mean for Rutgers? What would it mean for Rutgers if they walked away and they had an 8-4 record at the end of the regular season?
Oh, it would mean everything. I'm talking 6-6 means a lot for this team. If they could ever steal those 2 games and be 8-4, it would mean a lot just to show that they can do it. A lot of talk on Rutgers has been, do they belong in the Big Ten, obviously? And for the longest time, the answer was really no.
Yeah.
But the past couple of years, they've kind of shown that it's switching to yes. And them in Maryland don't seem to get that respect because they haven't really done it, obviously. They haven't found that success in the conference. But when you look at the rest of the Big Ten and kind of how it's evened out across the board outside of the top 2 or 3 teams, Rutgers has kind of shown that they belong, and getting back to a bowl game shows that, but definitely an 8-win season with 5 wins in the Big Ten, that would do everything for this program to kind of give them the confidence and the just showing the country that they can do this moving forward.
I'd like to thank Greg Patuto coming on the show. He is the managing editor of the SB Nation site covering Rutgers football, basketball, and other athletics going on at the Rutgers Scarlet Knight Athletic Department. You can follow Greg on on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Greg Patuto. You can follow me on the same platform at JStevens07. This has been Locked on Buckeyes here on a Thursday. I'll see you next time.